Well, good morning. I'd like to call this meeting of the Campaign Finance Board to order. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes from the September 28th, 2017 meeting. I move their approval. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
There's one abstention.
Not here.
Right. Art was not here. And therefore the motion carries. The next item on the agenda is my report. So good morning and welcome to the October 13, 2017 public meeting of the New York City Campaign Finance Board. Today the board will be voting on the second public funds payments for the general election that will be held on November 7th. Earlier this week, New Yorkers enjoyed one of the many benefits of the campaign finance program when candidates for mayor of New York were invited to a televised debate. Mayoral candidates participating in the matching funds program are required to attend all televised debates. Additionally, there will be a public advocate debate taking place on October 16th and a controller debate on October 17th. Both will be broadcast by New York One, New York One Noticias, and WNYC. In closing, I encourage all New Yorkers to pay attention to the debates, read the voter guide, and go vote on November 7th. I now turn to CFB Executive Director Amy Loprest for her report.
In speaking about going to vote, I just want to remind everyone that today is the deadline to register to vote in the general election. Your voter registration form has to be received by the Board of Elections by today. So if you are not registered, you should go to the board and file your voter registration form. Also, today is the last day to submit a voter registration form to switch parties for next year's primaries. So if you want to switch your party affiliation, or if you are not registered in a party and you wish to participate in next year's primaries, you must file that voter registration form with the Board of Elections and have it received today. New York has the earliest deadline among all the 11 states that still have closed primaries to file their registration forms, and it is the only state in the country that has a deadline that is in the year before the election. Again, it's hard to believe that you have to be thinking about next September's primaries today, but if you want to vote in next year's primaries, you're going to need to, for state elective offices, you're going to need to switch your party affiliation today.
All right, thank you. Thank you. The next item on our agenda, it will be a vote on the public funds payments. Amy, would you like to tee that issue up for us?
Sure. We are recommending a number of payments. First, for the office of mayor, candidate Bill de Blasio, $82,388. Nicole Malliotakis, $200,235 for total for that office of $282,623. For the office of public advocate, Letitia James of public funds payment, $2,479, which is the only recommended payment for that office. For the office of borough president, for Manhattan Borough President, Gail Brewer, $187,838. For Queensborough President, Melinda Katz, $9,082. For Staten Island Borough President, Thomas Scherbanko, $8,903. In City Council, for City Council District 1, Margaret Chin, $55,280. Aaron Foldenauer, $64,741. In Council District 4, Rebecca Hare, $771. In Council District 9, Tyson Lord Gray, $11,400. Bill Perkins, $570. In Council District 14, Randy Abreu, $11,770. Fernando Cabrera, $10,944. In City Council District 18, Michael Beltzer, $1,111. In City Council District 19, Paul Graziano, $29,423, and Paul Vallone, $285. In City Council District 23, Joseph Concanon, $95,095. In Council District 24, Mohammed Rahman, $114. In City Council District 27, Rupert Green, $855. I. Danique Miller, $3,990. In Council District 28, Adrian Adams, $30,922. In City Council District 32, Michael Scala, $2,878. In City Council District 35, Jabrani Bisport, $3,234. In Council District 40, Matthew Eugene, $95,095. In City Council District 41, Alika Ampry Samuel, $2,565. In City Council District 42, Inez Barron, $313. In City Council District 43, Justin Brannon, $9,247. In City Council District 44, Kalman Yeager, $95,095. In City Council District 47, Raimundo Donaro, $23,774. In City Council District 48, Stephen Saperstein, $71,321. In City Council District 49, Michael Penrose, $2,992. In City Council District 51, Dylan Schwartz, $6,498 for total payments for City Council of $630,283, and the total payments for this payment disclosure statement, $1,121,208.
Okay, I move the approval of those payments. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Abstention? The motion carries. Next item on our agenda is a vote to lift the expenditure limit. Would you explain that, Amy?
When there is a non-participating candidate that raises or spends more than a certain amount, the spending limit in that office is either raised or completely eliminated. The staff is recommending that the board increase the applicable expenditure limit to 150% of the normal limit for all participants in City Council Districts 24 and City Council District 44.
I'll move the approval of the lifting of those expenditure limits. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. The next item on our agenda concerns the campaign of Andrew J. Sullivan. Mr. Sullivan appeared some weeks ago at a meeting of the board, at which time the board deferred consideration of this issue pending further information and hearings, which we will conduct today. So if the CFB staff would take a seat at the table, and I understand we have an appearance by Ms. Daly and her lawyer. So please have a seat.
My name is Brent Lally. I just wanted to give you something
All right. Yeah, sure. Hand them out.
Can you give one to she has that? Okay.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Oh, I forgot to turn it back. All right. Do you need me to repeat anything? My mic was off. No? Okay. Thank you. So we're going to ask the staff of the Campaign Finance Board to make a short introductory presentation, and then we'll turn to you for yours. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Bethany Persky, Deputy General Counsel for the CFB. With me is Senior Auditor Nalasia Mingo. Before the board today is the matter of the Andrew Sullivan campaign in the 2013 elections for City Council District 47. Mr. Sullivan appeared before the board at the August 31st meeting of this year, and at issue today is the liability of the campaign's former treasurer, Maureen Daly, for any penalties arising from two alleged violations. Those violations are submitting false contribution reporting and documentation and material misrepresentation.
Thank you. Floor is yours.
Brent Lally, the attorney for Ms. Daly. I also want to introduce several counsel here in the audience as well.
You got it? Is it on? Okay. Thank you. I have, just again to repeat, my name is Grant Lally. I'm counsel for Maureen Daly, and I also want to make it clear I'm here only in the capacity of representing her in her individual capacity. Since this is not, these proceedings are not against the campaign, they are against her personally. And I believe it was mislabeled in some of these proceedings because she was not labeled as a respondent in today's actions. But let me also introduce several counsel and others here in the audience here. Sobia Mahmood is an attorney with my office. Anna Andreescu is here also, an attorney. I have two law interns who have been working on this case, and it has been quite an educational experience, as we will discuss. Swati Polche, who is here. Jasmine Aiken, who is here. We also have Gregory Kursop and April Cardina, and the former executive director of the Queens Republican Party, Pierre Alcantara, here as well. And why are all these people here?
Well, I just say we appreciate your giving credit for those of your office who worked on this. It's very nice.
Yeah, well, it's why did they all come? They all came because I have to tell you, I've been an attorney for 30 years. I have never seen something so frivolous, unsubstantiated, baseless, and speculative filed as a pleading before any official body in my 30-year career. And let me address nor anything that so clearly violates the most basic rights of a respondent, including refusing to allow her an oath hearing, which we demanded in this case. And the excuse given by counsel, and it's in the papers I submitted to you, the excuse given by counsel to deny her an oath hearing, to require us to be here today, to not allow us to call witnesses, was because Andy Sullivan waived her right to an oath hearing. I've never in my life heard of a third party, and we've detailed and briefed it, a third party able to waive the due process rights, the 14th Amendment rights, the New York State's Constitution rights, the New York State Administrative Procedure Laws rights, the New York City Charter's rights, to have a hearing where you can confront witnesses, where you can subpoena witnesses, where you can cross-examine witnesses, where you can actually have a real trial where real evidence has to be presented. But I understand why there's a desire in this here by counsel's office not to have an oath hearing, because there's nothing here. Ms. Daly served, and I'll lay the facts out. Ms. Daly served as treasurer, a volunteer treasurer, for 2 weeks in early 2013, nearly 5 years ago, for the Andrew Sullivan campaign. She was a volunteer. She was not paid. She took over from a paid treasurer named Chance Haywood. Chance Haywood collected the cards that are subject here, and these are 11 or 10. The numbers keep changing depending upon what documents we've received from counsel. Those 11 cards were received by Chance Haywood. He was the treasurer at the time those cards were received. Ms. Daly, he resigned. Ms. Daly took office, took that position as a volunteer 4 weeks later. She served for 2 weeks. She never filed anything with this board, nothing. She did not sign a certification or file a certification with this board, which means she has not agreed to be personally responsible for anything. When she finally got access, 2 weeks, got access to the bank account online records, she reviewed them. She saw that there were withdrawals being done by the candidate for his personal use. She saw that cash receipts that she knew had come in for fundraisers weren't being deposited. They were being pocketed by the candidate. She resigned that day. That is not a disputed fact. March 13th, 2013. She states it. The candidate states it. And he's very hostile to her, as you saw from his lunatic appearance here a month ago, where he accused her of everything, of ruining his entire life, much of which was not even appropriately before the board. But He then days later, filed all things. He and his bookkeeper. She never had one communication with CFB during her 2 weeks as treasurer, not one. She filed not one single document, not one, with CFB. She filed, there was a designation form, not even signed by her, which was filed on February 25th, 2013. She resigned March 13th, 2 weeks later, 2013. She had no further contact with the campaign. Everyone agrees she was severed from the campaign at that date. Done. How nearly 5 years later we are now sitting here and there has been a recommendation that she be fined more than $15,000 is incredible. And what makes it more incredible is the basis for these charges. And it's stated in your papers presented by counsel. What is the basis? What is the basis for her being here? Because Andy Sullivan insisted that she be included here. He came here before you a month ago, ranted and raved, and lied to you. Blatantly, openly lied to you. He said, for example, he didn't know Noreen Brody, the woman who submitted a letter to this board stating that she, Noreen Brody, signed the cards. Why that wasn't accepted, and why now, as of yesterday, I might add, yesterday, I received papers from counsel, yesterday, where the theory of this case was changed to now be, and I can quote it, but I'll paraphrase it, where now it's stated that Noreen Brody filled out the cards, because obviously the handwriting in the cards matches Noreen Brody, but that Maureen Daly somehow signed the cards. No one says Maureen Daly has signed these cards. Noreen Brody said she signed the cards in a letter to this board. These cards were altered, recreated by the bookkeeper, Emma DiBiase, which was stated March 6th, 2013, in a communication, a contact record with CFB, where she said she was recreating these cards. When CFB went back into that campaign, long after Maureen Daly was gone, and said, what cards were recreated? They responded with a list of 10 cards, the Brody Lynch cards that are the subject here. Those are the cards that were recreated or altered by Ms. DiBiase. I don't know what she did, but I do know that Noreen Brody said she signed them, and now we've got a charge, as of yesterday, that no, Ms. Daly signed these cards. You're very good attorneys. I mean, I've looked at your bios. Mr. Schaffer, you're double Harvard, former Harvard Law Review editor. Mr. Camp, you're triple Yale. I don't know which trumps, whether it's a four of a kind, what trumps what, and I'm sure you'll debate it between yourselves. You're an assistant district attorney in Newfield. Mr. Davis worked on the Watergate prosecution committee. You all have fine credentials, PhD at Berkeley, doing great work in finance with an MBA from NYU. You're all extremely well educated. You're all familiar with the law. This is utter nonsense. You had a man come in here and rant and rave, a man who was highly motivated to point fingers at anybody else, who sat here and lied, said he didn't know Noreen Brody. Well, sure he knows Noreen Brody.
Does your client know Noreen Brody?
Sure, absolutely.
Was your client the person, and I'd like to hear this from your client, did you solicit contributions from her?
That's not the charge here today.
I have a question.
I understand, but I'm not. This isn't the charge here today.
Well, it's relevant to the charge. It is relevant to our assessment of the charge to understand whether she was the person who actually spoke to Daly and any other member of the family about these contributions. Did she or didn't she?
She did not. She never had these cards. She's never seen.
That's not my question. Did she or did she not talk to the family, Noreen, and any other member of the family about these contributions?
Well, I'm going to ask her not to respond to that because that's not the charge here today.
Well, it's very relevant to the charge.
The charge is that she signed cards.
I understand.
She signed cards.
We have the cards. And relevant to determining whether she signed it is whether she had any interaction with them. So if she's refusing to answer the question, fine.
No, I think we can concede that she had interaction with that family.
About these contribution cards.
Okay, then you can answer the question.
I did not ask them for donations, and I did not ask anyone to complete the cards. I never solicited from the Brody or Lynch family.
So when Noreen Brody says that you did, she's not being accurately stating that.
That is correct.
And I should note, Noreen Brody, I don't know her, but from what I understand, she's a fine person. She has adult ADHD. She has a learning disability. She's under psychiatric care. She, by the way, knows Andy Sullivan.
Be careful
very well.
what you say here, because frankly, your submission was highly offensive in equating ADHD to being mentally disturbed. So you put that in your answer.
I believe it was disabled. I think that's the word I used.
And so
I think you're misquoting me on that.
Well, no, not in your answer. You used the phrase "mentally disturbed," not the one you submitted today. So be very careful what you say here.
I appreciate that, but I don't believe I did. But
I have a few other questions.
Disorder. I'm sorry. I believe it was disorder.
Well, we can see what your original answer said.
I think we should. And honestly,
did you access C-Smart on October 16th, 2013?
She did not. She gave the codes to a reporter who did.
She gave the codes to a reporter who did. Are you associated in any way with the Facebook group, The Truth, Andy Sullivan?
I'm going to object to that. I'm going to object to that bluntly. What difference does...
We're trying to assess credibility here. We have two...
No, you don't have a right to ask any question you want. First of all, I have a right to a hearing, which we've been denied.
Okay.
Those would not be relevant questions.
They're highly relevant to establish... We have two competing people. Each have said the other is the aggressor. Okay? We're trying to assess credibility. She doesn't have to answer whether she is associated with the Twitter account Cornelius McGraw or the Facebook group The Truth Andy Sullivan. I think it's relevant to credibility, to assessing who is telling the truth here. But if you don't want to answer, you don't have to answer.
I absolutely do not. That is not, I have no affiliation with that Twitter name. I am aware of what the candidate has said repeatedly, and I am not part of that page, that group. I know I am blamed for everything that goes wrong in his life, but I am not responsible for that.
And, okay.
Mr. Davis, I just want to also add, Ms. Daly was beaten by Mr. Sullivan. She was stalked for years by Mr. Sullivan. I have witnessed him submit false documents. He has called my office over 100 times, breathed heavily on the line, and hung up, or giggled and hung up. He is a very aggressive, psychotic man. He is a wonderful liar, consummate liar. He submits perjury with ease. And I'll say that as an officer of the court, because I've witnessed it.
Who prevailed in the various litigations?
Sir, I'm not going to go into the family court proceedings because, as you're aware, those are confidential proceedings, and those really don't have any place before a campaign finance board.
No,
You just raised the issue.
You just raised the issue.
Well, and also in your papers, I mean, you attack his credibility, and perhaps fairly, by pointing to certain proceedings against him. It seems to us it's relevant to ask who initiated those proceedings and what the outcome of those proceedings were.
Well, I don't know the answer to all of those, and I don't know that Ms. Daly, as a layperson, would be in a position to describe all those proceedings. I do know there were a number of proceedings over the years. They were, and again, let me take a step back. These are family court proceedings. They're very sensitive, and this board should be somewhat sensitive, especially when a woman has been abused, not to force that person to go through this again. I mean, we're only here for one reason, because Andy Sullivan asked for us to be here. And I should note, your own staff, recommended no proceedings against Ms. Daly. December 2016, a report was issued, a final penalty notice report was issued, absolving Ms. Daly of any responsibility. As recently as March.
I don't want to lose this thread. I just got to ask a lawyer's question to you as a lawyer.
Sure.
I'm not asking the question. Are you aware of any court or other proceeding that resulted in a judgment against Mr. Sullivan?
I'm not.
Thank you.
Ms. Daly, why do you think that Mr. Sullivan did the things that your lawyer just said he did, stalked you and beat you?
Yeah, you may answer me. Absolutely.
When I discovered that Mr. Sullivan was committing fraud on with his finances, I confronted him. He threatened me. He told me that this day would never come, that I would never appear before you, and that you would never discover his fraud unless I came and told you. I assured him that that was not the truth, that you would discover it through the audits. He threatened me and told me that I would not appear before you, and that he would see that that happened, that all it would take is a one-car fatality, and things just happen. I did not back down. I stood my ground. I cooperated with you. I told you what I knew because it was the right thing to do. Despite the fact that I lived in fear of him every day of my life, I did have restraining orders. Once I had the restraining orders, I came to you. I told you what I knew. And despite him threatening me on a daily basis not to do so, he has done everything he could for the last 4 years to ensure that I not be able to be here, including taking an attempt on my life. And still I'm here. I believe that I have done everything that any reasonable person couldn't expect a woman who has survived an abusive relationship to do. My family begged me to walk away. My family begged me to not respond and to not report what I knew, and I didn't do that. I did what was right because I believed it was the right thing to do, and I sit here after your staff investigated and said he was solely responsible, and because he raised a tantrum, I am sitting here. Your own staff recommended several times that I not be included in this, and because my abuser, my stalker, asked you to, I am here now.
Why did you become treasurer of the campaign?
Because he asked me to.
How did you know him?
We were involved at the time. We were dating at the time.
I mean, in fairness, another reason that you're here is at least in the review of some of the signatures on some of these suspect cards, they do appear to be your signatures. That is another reason that you're here, as unrelated to anything Mr. Sullivan said.
Mr. Davis, I mean, I'm one of the top election attorneys in New York State. I've handled dozens of, perhaps hundreds at this point, of petition challenges and recounts. I could probably qualify as a handwriting expert, having reviewed at least 100,000 signatures in election cases across the state. I've looked at this, and this is marked Exhibit A in our papers to you. I've looked at these. These are clearly, these signatures in these 10 cards are clearly different signatures. You look at the whorls, you look at the loops, you look at the slope, you look at all of the indicia of handwriting, and they are clearly different signatures. They're also not Maureen Daly's signature, but they're also very different signatures from each other.
We have a different view about that, but we'll...
I mean, I've litigated signatures, you know.
I understand.
Ad nauseum, I might say.
If we come back to the role as treasurer for a moment, you began by saying that Ms. Daly was treasurer, a volunteer treasurer for 2 weeks.
Right.
Of course, if you consider the official documentation, it was longer because the actual official resignation, apart from the letter, occurred later. And if you look at de facto, and that's what I want to look at now, it also might have been longer on the earlier side. That is, there appears to be evidence, and I'd like Ms. Daly to comment, or for you to comment on it, that Ms. Daly, in effect, functioned as the treasurer earlier than she officially became treasurer as part of the volunteer for the campaign. If that's a misimpression on my part, I'd like you to address it.
If I can respond, I mean, Chance Haywood was paid, and he was the treasurer. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Mr. Sullivan, when he was before you, said you would be. I don't know him. But he was the treasurer. He was a paid treasurer for, 10 months at least.
Don't know.
And he resigned. He resigned at the end of February.
So here's my question. I know that Ms. Daly submitted a letter of resignation on March 13th, and then the official form for the CFB came a couple months later. What role, if any, did Ms. Daly play in the preparation of the form that was submitted on March 15th?
I played no role in it.
Zero. She left on the 13th. She left. He attacked her on the 13th. That was it.
No, but she was, by your statement, for a 2-week period prior to March 13th was the treasurer. Presumably the statement took some time in preparation. I would think that Ms. Daly would have played some role in the preparation of that form that was submitted 2 days after her letter.
Sure. Do you want to respond? Go ahead.
When I agreed to be treasurer, I repeatedly asked the candidate to turn over the bank records. I needed to see the records and know what was going on in the campaign. He refused. I repeatedly asked for the 2-week period. As I said, we had a personal relationship, and he scared me. He threatened me, and he told me I was not getting them. He ended up ending up in the hospital. Through Emma DeBasi, I eventually did, on March 13th, get to see the financial records online. On that day, I was horrified to see what he was doing. And that is when I confronted him. That was the first time, the only time I saw the financial records. I never acted as treasurer. I was never signer on the account. I never saw the records until that day. By your own paperwork, you say who other than the treasurer can is a signer on the bank account. I was not a signer. I never acted as treasurer on this account. I had nothing to do with preparing the paperwork. When I thought I would be part of it, I looked at the records and immediately said, I am done. I am through with this. You are committing fraud, and I will not be part of it. And it turned into a very big, physical, aggressive fight.
To the best of your knowledge, who prepared that report?
I would be making a guess that it was Mr. Sullivan himself. I know he submitted it under his sign-in. We saw that from the evidence you sent us. And I
What
believe
about the prior treasurer? Would he have prepared some of it?
I don't know. I would think it was Mr. Sullivan and Ms. DeBasi.
And would you describe what her role in the campaign was, Ms. DeBasi?
She had the title of CFB liaison. I believe that she was actually possibly acting as treasurer, certainly as bookkeeper, and advising Mr. Sullivan. I believe she did enter the things into C-Smart, even though it was done under his sign-in. That was what I understood was the plan, that she would do the actual entering into C-Smart.
And you, sir, referred earlier to Ms. DeBasi's recreation of these cards. I know it's in your papers, but for the record, I'd like to, hear your a short summary of your
On March,
your theory or view of that.
I mean, look, it's in CFB records. That's where all of this comes from. On March 6th, Mr. Biasi and CFB staff were on the telephone. A contact report was prepared by CFB staff. They record that Mr. Biasi said that Mr. Chance Hayward, the prior treasurer, and she referred to as him, had not turned over all the records, so they were recreating contribution cards. A week later, that disclosure report number 7 was submitted. On the 15th, Mr. Biasi walked over the report.
What are the dates again, please?
March 6th of 2013.
Right.
The CFB telephone conference with Mr. Biasi, where she stated that Chance Haywood had kept a number of the cards. She didn't have them, so she was recreating the cards. On March 15th, 2013, Andrew Sullivan, online under his sign-in, submitted the disclosure report number 7, together with apparently copies of the contribution cards.
And this, but of course, this was a period when Ms. Daly was the treasurer.
She resigned on the 13th. So 2 days before the submission, she resigned.
Right, but as of March 6th, she was treasurer.
As of March 6th, she was treasurer, correct. Well, let me just, do you want to go through the sequence first? And
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Didn't mean to interrupt you.
March 18th, Mr. Biasi walks into CFB the physical copies of the contribution cards and the disclosure report, hand delivers that here to this office. And I don't recall the exact date, but in April, I believe, CFB contacts the campaign to inquire as to what was recreated by the campaign on June 6th?
It was May 22nd they first contacted them, and June 6th was the first response from the campaign.
But by recreating, I just don't want the record to be ambiguous in this point. she was not saying that these were fraudulent cards. She was saying that they had to be redone, and that presumably the signatures were, the signatures of the people whose contribution cards they purported to be. It was not an admission that the signatures were fraudulent or forged.
No, it's not an admission, but what it is, and you're aware of chain of custody. Obviously, at that point, Ms. DiBiase had custody of these cards, had control of these cards, or was recreating cards at that point to then circulate and have signed. Now, these cards were all dated early February of 2013. March, Ms. DiBiase says she's recreating these cards. They're submitted March 15th, March 18th. They're hand delivered to this office. May 22nd, an inquiry goes from this office to Ms. DiBiase. June 6th, Ms. DiBiase and Mr. Sullivan, and it's a sworn statement, respond to the inquiry filed by CFB. And CFB has a series of inquiries that said, please tell me what cards you were recreating. They list those 10 cards as the ones that they were recreating.
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify. The June 6th letter, which is Exhibit 18 to the original penalty notice, does not say that the cards are already in her possession. What Ms. DiBiase says is she discovered checks for which there were no accompanying contribution cards at all that she could find, and that she asked our liaison how she might be able to create or recreate contribution cards for those checks. She was trying to see how the contributions could remain in compliance because she couldn't find the cards. It wasn't that at that point she had any cards.
Except if you'll see on number 4, which is page 2 attached, which responds to CFB's question 4 from its May 22nd letter, which is, please list all other cards which you recreated. Those 10 cards are then listed under item number 4 as they're described as altered contribution cards, but they're in response to CFB's questions as to what other cards did you recreate. Sure, go ahead.
You asked again my role as treasurer and Ms. DiBiase. I think it's very important that on March 6th, Ms. DiBiase spoke to an auditor here, I believe it was Ms. Golden, and discussed these cards, discussed the campaign, in my opinion, as though Ms. DiBiase was treasurer. I was not privy to that conversation, and I did not understand why CFB, if I was treasurer, why they were speaking to her. She was acting as treasurer. She was treated by CFB as treasurer on March 6th when they had that conversation with her. No attempt was meant to contact me.
Do you have a position as to whose signature is on those cards? Because they clearly appear to be a different handwriting from the handwriting further up on the card.
I mean, can I just respond? Because you have a letter from Noreen Brody. She says she signed the cards. She says she signed the cards. It's a letter that was sent to this office in January of 2014, where Noreen Brody says she signed the cards for the members of her family.
This is the same Noreen Brody whose credibility you challenged just a little while ago on a different issue.
Well, if you're going to challenge your credibility, what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander, as they say.
So I believe what Ms. Brody said was that she filled out and signed her own card and filled out the cards for her family members, which the handwriting...
That's not what it says.
We can look at the...
One person at a time, please.
But what the handwriting on the cards bears out is that Noreen's card was filled out and signed by her. The other cards were filled out by the same person who filled out Noreen's card and then signed by somebody else.
And did Ms. Brody say whether she had
I'm looking to locate her letter with her exact words on it right now, but she...
Can you enter an appearance if you're going to speak?
My name is Sophia Mahmoud.
Can you speak actually very loudly as well because you don't have a microphone?
My name is Sophia Mahmoud. I'm with the same firm, Lally and Messier, and I'm appearing on behalf of Ms. Daly.
Okay. And you just... While you give her back the mic, while you have the mic, just repeat what you just said about the record so it's part of our record.
Exhibit K of our brief has Noreen Brody's letter. The last paragraph says, I signed my siblings, sisters, and brothers' names on the form that Maureen gave me. I signed their names to support the candidate, Andrew Sullivan.
And what we pointed out is the signatures on the other cards are different than the signature on her own card.
Right. Our interpretation of that was to match it up with the handwriting to say, okay, she said she signed their names because the names are filled out at the top where it has the employer information, but the actual signature was one that appeared to match Ms. Daly's.
And again, the signatures don't match. I mean,
Right.
any even a layperson can look through these and see these are different signatures, clearly different signatures. Do a couple of them look similar to one another? Yes. But are there a series of very different signatures? Yes.
So in that same statement, Ms. Brody says that the forms were given to her by you, Maureen Daly, but you have just said that you had nothing to do with those
I
cards.
did not personally solicit any donations from her. She did come to a fundraiser earlier in the campaign. I believe it was, I can't remember the date, I'm sorry. There was a fundraiser, and I did hold up the forms and ask anyone who had not yet contributed at the fundraiser to please take a form and contribute. And I believe that is what she meant by receiving the form from me. I had invited her to the fundraiser. It was near our home, near her home.
What other interactions did you have with Ms. Brody, Noreen Brody? I'm sorry, yes, Noreen Brody.
Much later on, I don't remember what date, one of the family members put in my mailbox checks that they received from the campaign that they were concerned they received and returned. They gave them to me thinking that I was still involved. I had not told them about my problems with the campaign and with Mr. Sullivan. And they just thought that that was the thing to do, to put them in my box, because they knew I knew him. That was the first that I heard of this, and I told them to tell the truth to CFB if they were asked. And that was it.
We've peppered you with a number of questions, and I don't know whether you had further either narrative or argument that you wish to make, but before we conclude, I'll invite you to tell us anything more you'd like to tell us.
I mean, thank you for allowing us to make a presentation. Again, we would have preferred this to be in an oath hearing, which is what we'd requested. We've submitted a brief, which I think covers these details at length and contains all the exhibit evidence. The only thing is, look, Mr. Sullivan appeared before you. You saw his demeanor. You saw him blaming everyone. I'm sorry. You saw Mr. Sullivan before you. You saw him blaming everyone in the world for all of his problems. He repeatedly lied to you, to your face, when he came before you. I mean, he said Maureen Daly, one of the things he said is Maureen Daly is related to the Brody family, very clearly. So she's related to them. She's not, and he knows that. You asked, I believe you asked the question, do you know Noreen Brody? And he said, no, I don't. Well, he went to grade school with her. She ministered to him in the hospital for several weeks. He knows her very well. So he lies with ease and facility. And he's highly motivated to lie because of two reasons. One, he's furious. He wants revenge on her. To call my office 100 times, to call an attorney's office, and we had a detective assigned to that to go at him. The county executive personally assigned a detective because at that time my office was broken into at that time, shortly after. So he's highly motivated. He's highly motivated by revenge. Why? And there's an old saying, no good deed goes unpunished. Because Miss Daly came here and reported his campaign. She came here and said he is taking, and the contact records are full of her meetings with CFB staff in the spring of 2013, after she left the campaign, advising them as to what he was doing wrong. So he is incendiary with rage against Miss Daly. That's one reason. Secondly, he is every dollar that he can move over to Maureen Daly is one less dollar that he will have to pay. And at this point, the claims against Maureen Daly represent more than 50% of the fines being recommended by CFB, which is incredible considering she filed nothing. She was involved in the campaign for 2 weeks. These aren't the only campaign contribution cards that have been deemed fraudulent by CFB. There are plenty of cards from long before Maureen was involved, and plenty of cards long after Maureen was not involved. But for some reason, the entirety of that claim is being attempted to be assessed against Maureen Daly. She submitted nothing. The two charges don't relate to her. Number one, charge 16 relates to a certification. She never signed nor filed a certification. She's not personally responsible. The charge specifies that she be held responsible because she is certified. So on its face, it does not state a proper cause of action because there's not the factual antecedent. Secondly, charge 17, which is filing a material misrepresentation for the purpose to secure matching funds. She never filed, number one, she'd never filed or submitted anything to this board, certainly never filed a request for matching funds. That was done long, long after she was gone from the campaign. So again, the fundamental elements of this that cause of action just aren't there.
Well, if it was conclusively established that, and I'm not saying it has been, but if it were conclusively established that Ms. Daly forged the signature of Noreen Brody, you don't think that would be sufficient to sustain charge 17?
If it would all depend, and I mean, to answer that, academically, if it would depend upon context, and you'd have to have it established as a minimal factual precursor that she in fact forged signatures. She's sworn to you she has not. Nobody has come here and said she has. This is literally like throwing a basket of chicken bones on the floor and trying to divine the future from it. There is nothing here. I mean, other than the rantings of Andy Sullivan, again, a pathological liar who is biased and highly motivated to lie. That is all that's here. Nobody else is saying. Okay. No one else is saying.
I have a few questions. Did Ms. Daly ask Noreen Brody to submit this letter to the CFB?
I'm sorry.
No, I did not. I was not aware that she was contacted by CFB even. I've only found out about that letter in, I believe, August when my counsel requested 2017. And for the record, I do want to state I absolutely did not sign the cards. I did not forge anyone's signature. I have never seen the actual physical cards. I have only seen, again, August of 2017 was the first time I saw copies of the card. I have never seen the originals. And I did not sign anyone else's name on cards.
Did you ever log into C-Smart?
I did not.
Why did you give the login information to a reporter?
Because at the time I was contacted regarding the outrageous stories that Mr. Sullivan was creating about me, the reporter was interested in covering it. He was actually working on an expose exposing Mr. Sullivan as a 9/11 fraud, exposing the fact that he had run a fake charity and accepted money as a 9/11 hero and a 9/11 survivor, which is how I got involved with him, and frankly, Miss Brody did. And that reporter was going to do that. He was being told by Mr. Sullivan that I had cost him matching funds and that I had done all kinds of terrible things on his campaign. And he asked me did I know what he was being accused of by CFB, and I said I did not. And I did allow him to sign in on it. I did not look, he did.
Was that expose ever published?
It was not. It was written, and it was decided by the publishers that Mr. Sullivan was too irrelevant, that it was a foregone conclusion that he would lose by a landslide, so they did not publish it. But he has been exposed through other means as being a 9/11 fraud. And that is what I am guilty of doing, getting involved with and falling under the prey of a con man, that I believed that someone I had gone to grammar school with had actually survived 9/11, had saved a life, and believed all of that, believed that's why he became a heroin addict, that that's why his life was as bad as it was. This is a man who was desperate, would do anything to get drugs, anything to get money. You're saying that the signatures things can appear to look like anyone's signature. They are not mine. I do not know whose they are. I can swear to you, they absolutely are not mine. I have never had those cards in my possession.
I can confirm that when we first received communications, I met with Ms. Daly a number of times, and right from the start she said, let me see these cards. I don't even know what they look like, what cards they're talking about. And it wasn't until I received the cards, copies of the cards from counsel in August of 2017, just 2 months ago, that she saw them.
And so given the Who invited the Brodies to the fundraiser?
I mentioned that there was going to be a fundraiser, that food would be served, and that perhaps she might want to come by.
And knowing the limited means of the family, why would you invite them to a political fundraiser?
I thought that she might come by and have some food and meet the candidate. I did not know. I didn't invite her to give a donation. I invited her to attend something that was very close to her home.
Okay, thank you.
I also don't know that it's been established what their actual means of the Brody family, of that extended family
she
are.
just mentions it in her own letter.
I see that, but again, she also says in the letter she didn't cash the check, and she did. So it's.
And Noreen is a very, very good, kind person, a decent person, who those who knew her and love her have always known that she was challenged. She states that she had a learning disability, and she does continue to struggle in life. And it is terrible that she was included in this. She did not do anything. She would not understand that there was anything wrong with what she said that she did.
Also, I just want to note, we sit here and talk about it as if we're in isolation. When those cards went out, those inquiry cards, Mr. Sullivan found those out right away. He ran around to all the people he felt were getting those cards to tell them not to respond to you.
He begged them not to respond,
and then or to answer in the affirmative that they did give money when maybe they didn't. So you have a system that is highly flawed because it's manipulable by the person you're attempting to investigate. And I've heard that back from the Republican chairman of Brooklyn, of Kings County. I mean, this is not, your process is not hermetic. And look, your counsel, the counsel on the board know that. You come to court with evidence like this, no judge is going to allow it in. But it's a process that is subject to manipulation. And an aggressive candidate or a person who's committed fraud, in this case, they already did reach into the process to try to change it.
You said that you wanted the opportunity to call witnesses. Whom would you want to call?
I would have, if the first thing is to have witnesses actually presented against you, and I think that was the real concern in by not allowing us to have an oath hearing, because someone would actually have to be presented to say, this is what happened. And no one is going to say, other than Andy Sullivan, who would just rant and rave, but other than him, no one's going to come up and say, Maureen Daly forged these things, because she didn't. So right there, there's no case. So start with that. And you're all trial attorneys. I don't have to explain trial strategy to you. I want a hearing because I want to see what the actual evidence is. I want there to be some actual evidence. It appears, this charge is unbelievable. Would any of you submit a charge, a complaint like this to court? Would you go in and say, well, it kind of looks like maybe the signatures are kind of similar and it appears that maybe they kind of had a relationship? Come on. No court of law. My mother's a Supreme Court justice. This would be dismissed right off the bat, maybe with sanctions. Is this Weil Gotshal material? Is this Harvard Law School material? Is this Yale material? No, of course not. We're sitting here trying to divine, without a single handwriting evaluation, mind you, trying to divine, the worlds on a. And again, I'm the best handwriting expert in the room because I've done that. I've litigated it, and I can tell you these aren't the same signatures. So let me speak as an expert.
Well, look, this is a different form of proceeding, to be sure, and okay.
Thank you.
Can I ask Ms. Actually, I do have a question, if I may, for Ms. Persky, that relate to the question of if Ms. Daly was the treasurer and for how long, and the significance of. So her lawyers raised the issue of whether she signed a certification.
Yes.
What are the implications of that? She says she resigned on March 13th of 2013.
Yes.
But actually, it's the staff's position that actually that resignation was not effective until much later.
Correct.
Is there any way to address those issues? I know there's several issues, but they basically relate to the question of was she the treasurer and for how long?
Great. So we'll go first to the issue of the certification. It is true that she did not file the certification, which is generally what arrest form, which designated her as the treasurer. That's what was submitted on February 25th. She was holding herself out as the treasurer. The campaign held her out as the treasurer. In CFB staff's understanding, she was the treasurer. She was going to be filling that role. And the document that was accepted, she was then entered into our system as the treasurer of record. As far as the time between March 13th and May 7th, the contact records that are attached to the notice and to the board memo show that she was, in fact, attempting to resign. That's certainly true. She contacted CFB staff, said, I want to resign. How do I do it? She was walked through the process, submitted a resignation letter, which is not how we do it. There's the campaign has to actually designate a new treasurer or file a new certification. None of that was, in fact, done until May 7th. And so that's when she was removed from our records as having been the treasurer. But it is, in fairness, we did attach all of the records of the time in between when she was attempting to resign. It was clear that was her intention.
Am I right that I'm looking at the contact record that suggests there was a call on March 25th, which is when she asked, I'm just quoting from the contact list, contact memo, she asked me to send her information on resigning as treasurer with the NYC BOE.
The reason I did that, if I can address that, is I kept getting emails as though I were treasurer, and I kept contacting CFB and saying, I'm not treasurer. I never had any financial records. I cannot file. I cannot answer for anything that's being done. When I called that day, there's a lot missing from that contact record where I explained to, I believe it was Mr. Cho and Mr. Dragatakis, that I was being threatened, that I did not have the records. To say that I attempted to resign, I told the candidate while he was threatening me that I was through, that I would have nothing to do with it, and ended anything with him. And it separated myself from the campaign. He states in his response that he fired me on that day. So that no one's arguing that that's the day I left the campaign. To say that I only resigned on May 7th is, I believe, the day that he decided to replace me. So you were holding me responsible for the fact that the man who was accusing me and setting me up to take the fall for his fraud was refusing to replace me. I had no control over that.
My question for counsel was whether earlier before March 25th. That was my only question I was going to ask.
March 25th is the first record that we have of Ms. Daly affirmatively contacting CFB staff and attempting to resign.
That was my question.
Look, I do a lot of election work. You may want to consider, if you haven't already done so, and I'm not sure, I don't believe you have, devising a better procedure for deciding, for logging who's responsible or not. Then Ms. Daly actually never signed to accept as treasurer. The only signature is Andrew Sullivan. So he sent in a form saying she's treasurer. That's it. So she never signed anything. She sent in a resignation letter. She quit. But you have people being signed up by third parties.
Well, she doesn't deny that she was treasurer.
No, she was treasurer for 2 weeks. She knew it. She knew it.
But the helpful suggestion.
I'm making a helpful suggestion, which is, look, look, you cannot be. And again, attorneys are all, and we're all intelligent people. People generally can't be held responsible in the United States of America.
Signature?
Pardon?
Is this not your signature?
That's the. Oh, is it? Why don't we have it here?
We don't have it.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
They didn't give us that.
It's also my understanding that Ms. Daly signed and submitted a form to the Board of Elections.
That is the form.
That's not the one that was.
Sorry, we were not provided that. There was a lot of stuff missing from the files that we were provided. What I have is a change of contact information, which is what Ms. Persky referenced.
But the memo that's
all we received. By the way, Ms. Daly's resignation letter we didn't receive either from CFB staff. That was not in the records we received. We produced that. That Ms. Daly had that in her records.
That wouldn't have been in our contact records because, again, the resignation letter is not the procedure by which a treasurer resigns for our. So even if it was sent, it would have been as an attachment to something that we said would have gone back and again under these contact records. Several times she was informed the resignation letter is not sufficient. We need a new certification or filer registration from the candidate signed stating that there's a new treasurer.
So in fact, Ms. Daly's not free to resign until there's a replacement.
Correct.
Is she be liable until there is a replacement?
Yeah. So I think this is what Amy had. This is the committee registration, treasurer, and bank information. That's the document I believe that you have up there, the Board of Elections.
Yeah.
So that may have been submitted as part of Mr. Sullivan's response.
But again, we didn't. Again, just as an attorney, I didn't get a lot of documents, and if Ms. Daly hadn't kept pretty good records herself, we wouldn't have this, including her resignation letter stamped by CFB.
We sent. 792 pages that represented everything that we had.
You received February 25th, 2013.
Yeah.
Well, look,
And
I
again,
want
these
the
are
record
quibbles.
to be
These are
clear
quibbles, but
that I don't hear you saying, and I don't think it would be accurate to say that anything was withheld from you that affected the fairness of this proceeding. And I also wanted to say, it slipped my mind when I spoke the last time, that you understand that the fact that you are not, that you were told that you did not have the right to an oath hearing was based on a legal interpretation by the CFB as to what the statute provides. The statute may be a good statute or a flawed statute.
Actually, I don't believe it's the statute. I believe the statute provides right for an oath hearing. It's the rules that were enacted pursuant thereto, which create an apparent gap, which was then used. I mean, we did research on, no one has ever even asserted such a thing. This is a matter of first impression. No one's ever asserted such a thing ever before in American history, apparently, that a third party can simply waive the rights for another competent adult human being to have the right to a hearing.
Well, it's not an unheard of concept that the entity, that the right to the hearing belongs to an entity, not to an individual.
But you're holding
the entity here is the campaign.
If you're only seeking to hold the campaign responsible, then the answer is absolutely correct. But if you're looking to hold her individually responsible, not for anything she did as treasurer, but something outside of her 2-week service as treasurer, then of course she's an individual respondent.
Well, and one's procedure as an individual respondent depends on the statute and regulations. I mean, we understand your preference for an oath hearing, but this is not a situation where due process is being denied. This is a hearing before this board as valid, if different, as a hearing before oath.
I will respectfully disagree with that. My position is set forth in writing for the record if we need to go forward on this in my brief, and we can have a discussion on that some other time. But
fair enough.
It is a matter of first impression.
Can you address Mr. Lawley's position that her failure, that Ms. Daly's failure to sign a certification is relevant to her liability or lack thereof?
Again, we would say that actively signing and submitting the form to us, signing up as treasurer, holding oneself out as treasurer, conducting the responsibilities of a treasurer, functionally she was acting as treasurer. This is a purely administrative paperwork issue. And it is true that a treasurer cannot effectively resign until another treasurer has been appointed. Yes, in this instance, I believe Mr. Sullivan appointed himself the treasurer, which is one option.
But I had no control over that. I had absolutely no control. I was literally running for my life from this man. I was made leave my home for 2 weeks by the New York State Police that they did not feel I was safe at home until I had a restraining order in effect. I had zero control over Mr. Sullivan naming himself. He refused. I kept begging CFB. I called. When I spoke to Mr. Cho, he advised me to go to the police when I told him what had been said to me by Mr. Sullivan and his campaign manager. I could not force him to name me, and CFB kept telling me that we don't interfere in the workings of the campaign. As far as we're concerned, you're still treasurer. I had Mr. Lally call. He spoke with Chris Dragatakis, who confirmed that I did not have any liability for the campaign at that point.
And when did Ms. Daly first signal clearly to the Campaign Finance Board her desire and intention to resign as treasurer?
That was March 25th. There may have been a resignation letter submitted to the campaign prior to then, but our first contact on that subject was March 25th.
Wait, I hadn't caught that before. The March 13th letter was submitted only to the campaign?
Correct. And again,
I didn't know the process. I want to also mention, I never got my welcome kit. I remember laughing when I got it. I received my welcome kit welcoming me as treasurer in June of 2013, well after we all agree I had resigned. When I came and met with Ms. Persky, terrified that he would be downstairs and know I was here, she didn't know what day I had ended as treasurer. She asked me, well, what day were you removed? And I couldn't answer it because no one ever confirmed I had been, because he refused to name me. I really feel like this is something on March 13th when I confronted this dangerous man and he threatened me and hurt me. He physically hurt me that night, and I kept at it and I said, you are not going to stop me from doing what's right. And I did it, and I repeatedly did it, and came here and risked my life against what my family wanted me to do. And you are allowing him to use your agency to do exactly what he promised he'd do on March 13th, see that I was held responsible for everything that I confronted him with that he had done. And I really am disappointed that in this city, this is Domestic Abuse Awareness Month, and that I'm sitting here trying to fight charges that my abuser and my stalker has insisted are mine. Your own staff 3 times said I didn't do, that they don't hold me responsible. And yet, because he wants me here, I'm here. I did not do this. He said he'd have me here and he'd have me blamed, and sure enough, that is exactly what has been allowed to happen.
And let me just put for the record, your staff recommended no charges against Ms. Daly. They weren't even in contact with Ms. Daly. She wasn't even on the radar for charges for years. And I raised the statute of limitations issues. I mean, you got a 14-month statute of limitations from a final report to come up to file your charges. I mean, this is now nearly 5 years after this. But let me take a step back.
Let me just intervene very briefly.
Sure.
This does not pertain to the ultimate decision in this case. But I just want to repeat Mr. Davis's comment earlier. You're here not because Mr. Sullivan wanted you here. You're here because this board determined that there was sufficient evidence to at least raise an issue that required being resolved. I want to be clear about that without any prejudice to what the outcome is going to be.
That's contrary to the written record in this case. The written record states.
We've heard you. I think enough is enough on this point.
Okay.
You've made your point, and I understand your point.
Okay.
And I'm sympathetic with important points you've made.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this board made its judgment. I know you say you're the world's greatest handwriting expert. I understand that.
Not the world's greatest. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. No, I didn't say that.
But he just said he was better than we are.
But all I'm saying is this board made its judgment that we should give notice, because we would consider it's based on our view of the handwriting, based on Noreen Daly's what she had said in terms of the history, and yes, some things that Mr. Sullivan said, but it was not strictly because of Mr. Sullivan, and that's why we provided the notice, give you the opportunity. We've heard the arguments, and again, I'm not dismissing any of the arguments you've made at all, but I'm just saying that that's the process. I'm not sure there's value in going back and forth about why we made the decision that you should be given notice of the potentiality of a penalty.
I appreciate that, and look, I understand he's a difficult person to deal with. You've had him here for a session last month, and I've seen some of the letters, the alternately pleading and threatening letters that he sent into council over the years. I just hope at the end of the day that what is pretty clearly factual here is what is found by the board. Let me also just one other thing. Mr. Sullivan appeared here last month and made a lot of defamatory remarks about Miss Daly, including stalking children, which was absolutely false. He also made false statements about Chance Haywood and him stealing records. But I'm here concerned about Miss Daly.
How do you know those are false? The statement about Chance Haywood.
He stated that he couldn't find him.
He claims he stole all the records when he left as treasurer, and then we see in a contact report that Chance Haywood is back in 2016 working with Mr. Sullivan again on this case. So he didn't disappear and steal all the records. He was back 3 years later working with Mr. Sullivan. So that's pretty inconsistent with he took all my records and disappeared. So, but as to the stalking, Did you stalk his children?
I absolutely did not stalk his children,
So-
and it is a lie.
I'm going to ask that televised, because this board has placed that those statements, and we're informing you now that those are false, and they're clearly defamatory, and they're very, very intentionally defamatory. I'm asking that video be pulled down from YouTube, or have that section blotted out, because it is defamatory. And I'm asking that this board please respect that aspect of the law and not publicize what are defamatory statements. And again, it was an ugly session. I saw it.
Okay. Well, that request is also a matter of first impression, but we will take your request seriously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything further?
No, I think we've covered most ground. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
At this time, the board will go into deliberations.
Should we wait?
It's up to you. You can wait,
Were you coming back
or
now?
somebody will call you.
Okay. Would you be coming back sometime soon with a?
I hope so.
Well, the board will have to vote in public session on any decision. So you can wait, or someone can call you. I mean,
How long do you expect?
it's hard to. I mean, it's impossible to know. I mean, it's a lot of.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
So I'll give you a call if you want to head out. I can give you a call as soon as they're
Sure. That's fine. That's great. Thank you.
I'd like to wait this question.
You know, I don't. Let me give you my. Mr. Dimitropoulos, how are you, sir? Nice to see you.
Actually, your quote was, "You're the best expert in the room."
In the room, see? But my name is Grant Lally. I grabbed the wrong cards on the way out from. Okay, thank you.
also know that in all circumstances, we know that the candidate is responsible to maintain credibility issues that is true.
I think Hillary must have got together.
Does Amy know we've reconvened?
Yeah, Hillary's out looking for her. I'm
Okay.
going to give her just a couple more. Okay. All right, so the board is reconvened. Following deliberations, the next item on our agenda is a vote on penalties. On the agenda, there had been, as the first item under penalties, Empire State 32 BJ SEIU PAC for 2017. The board has decided to defer that consideration of that matter to a later date. The second item under the vote on penalties involves the campaign of Andrew J. Sullivan, 2013. And the board is going to propose in a moment the following findings, violations, and penalties against the campaign of Andrew J. Sullivan. Failing to report a merchant account used for campaign purposes, penalty of $100. Failing to provide bank merchant account statements, $200. Failing to report transactions, $112. Failing to report compliance with cash receipts reporting and documentation requirements, $350. Failing to demonstrate compliance with reporting requirements for receipts and disbursements, $250. Filing late disclosure statements, $520. Failing to file a disclosure statement, $300. Accepting an over-the-limit contribution, $440. Accepting contributions from corporations, limited liability companies, or partnerships, $1,048. Failing to document transactions, $400. Failing to report and document basic campaign functions activities, $400. Maintaining a petty cash fund greater than $500, $46. Failing to respond to audit requests for information and documentation, $1,120. Failing to demonstrate that spending was in furtherance of the campaign, $296. Converting campaign funds to a personal use, $709. Submitting false contribution reporting and documentation, $2,743. Material misrepresentation, $5,000, for total penalties of $14,034. These penalties are assessed against the candidate. There has been varying testimony raising issues of credibility, but the fact remains that the candidate is ultimately responsible for his or her campaign, and therefore these penalties will be imposed on the candidate. With respect,
and the campaign.
And the campaign. Thank you. With respect to charges against the person who served as for part of the time as secretary to the campaign.
Treasurer.
Sorry. It's been a long morning. Treasurer to the campaign, Maureen Daly. The board raised this issue on its own based on evidence which we believed and continue to believe raised significant issues as to her potential culpability, specifically with respect to some material misrepresentations. However, the board has concluded that the evidence is sufficiently murky that we have decided that no portion of these penalties will be assessed against Ms. Daly. Do I have a motion to?
So moved.
Oh, and I need to add at the end that there was a charge of a breach of certification. The board found that such breach had occurred, but no penalty is.
So the effect is that of a breach is that recommendation is that the campaign is forfeits any public funds that they received, or and also is not eligible for any additional public funds. So in this case, it has
it's not applicable.
No dollar value, but it is a consequence.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. I'm going to skip ahead for a moment to the last item on our agenda, the vote to issue proposed rules for public comment. We're going to defer until a later meeting of the board. Do we have any need for executive session?
Yes, I need to talk to you about that.
All right, the board, I will propose that the board now go into executive session. Second to the motion?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The board will go into an executive session. I'm told we have to come back in order to adjourn, but there will be no further business after the executive session. Thank you.
Rules, just not the penalty guidelines.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that. Yeah, but yeah.
That's what I want to have
So, Amy, an interesting issue came up. Does the board have the authority in and of itself to refer a matter to oath? Could we have said, we're throwing our hands up, this requires
I earlier misspoke. We're not going to defer. We're going to address the proposed rules for public comment. Amy, you want to explain what these are?
Well, Hillary's going to give a brief explanation.
Okay, Hillary, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Hillary Wiseman. I am the General Counsel for the New York City Campaign Finance Board. Today, the board will vote on proposed amendments to the board rules regarding early public funds payments. These amendments are being made to conform with local law 168 for the year 2016. Pursuant to a Section 1043 of the New York City Charter, the proposed rules will be published in the City Record, and after a 30-day public comment period, the board will hold a public hearing on November 16 at 12 p.m. for anyone who wishes to testify. Thank you.
All right. I move the issuance of the proposed rules for public comment. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you very much, and the board now stands adjourned.
I do know.
Conflicts of interest board.
Yeah. He had actually emailed me yesterday.
I was going to get in touch with him because I'm disposed to this.